as I even begin to talk about consciousness, Vinnana, noticing that conscious experience is happening now. It's almost difficult to speak because it's, recursive. It's consciousness, in some sense, is the life of the khandhas, of the aggregates. So to check that out for yourself, you might notice, are you seeing right now? Is there seeing happening? Right? So how do you know that? How is that happening? For example, let's look at some particular khandha like perception. Are you perceiving colors? Are you perceiving forms, human forms? Right? So there's perception. Sanya. Okay, so you observe sanya arising right now. How is sanya being known? Sort of like, in some basic way, what is this? What is this experience of, well, it turns in on itself because language doesn't catch this, but to be conscious of the world, to notice that you're conscious of the world is to notice consciousness. You can't separate it out. You want to, right? You want to understand. You want to say, oh, that. But remember that Vedana, Sanya, and Sankara, feeling, perception, and formations, constructions, all arise moment by moment, dependent upon, nourished by contact, pasa. So contact is the coming together of that which is the external base, shall we say, that which is seen. But let's not even, let's just say the external base, the internal base, the perceptual system, if you want to get material about it, but just think the internal base and consciousness. Without consciousness, seeing doesn't happen. Perception doesn't happen. The forming process, the constructing process, the experiencing process. So I bring us back to how foundational this teaching is on the aggregates. So we have this sense that I hope is beginning to take form in your mind, even if it's just a construct, just a set of thoughts, just a belief or a topic of interest that comes up through your study and listening to these talks, whatever sense has been constructed of these khandhas, let's take advantage of it. So we've begun over time to, I hope, weave a sense of the khandha as this really essentially formless process clinging to itself. So this constantly rising and vanishing collaboration of qualities clinging to itself. So there's the fact of these experiencing of what we take to be solids and liquids and so on. And these are nourished physically, by food and air and so on. And we have feelings that arise with contact, and the feelings, the pleasant and unpleasant and neutral feelings with eye contact and ear contact, tongue, nose contact, skin and body contact, tactile, haptic, and so on, and mind contact. And so the constant flow and flux of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral feelings is happening selflessly and automatically as simply the functioning in the world of this aggregated process. So you might say, feeling is happening. No, I am feeling, right? Feeling is just happening. You could deal with I am some other time, right? And likewise, with contact, with this kind of miasmatic feeling process constantly going on, it's a flood. It's just a, the sensitivity we've talked about. It's so acute. All the little nerve endings, all of the incredible kind of physiomechanics of the eyes and ears. So sensitive. And it's a flood right now as I'm speaking. It's a flood, and not in the sense of asava. It's just a huge wash of feeling happening now, and the forming into particularities of qualities and objects in that flood is sanya, in that constant barrage. Sounds so aggressive. It's a much more natural process. It's just happening as a result of this aggregated process coming into being moment by moment. And as part of that, patterns form. And those formations and the contributing and reforming of those formations through the kind of processes that naturally unfold in the body mind based on prior processes. So processes condition future processes. So volitional formations form the formations, set the tone, set the direction of the next formations. Sankhara, and so we have the constructions and the constructing process out of which we have the resonant chamber that becomes the defining features of the self. It's in this place of the vibrating of these feelings and perceptions and formations that I am happens in time, that I am has memory and projection to the future, that I am has my emotional history and my narrative, my life story, my family, my problems, myself, my hopes, my wishes, constantly being vibrated by this inflow of Vedana Sanya. And this poor Rupa, the meat beast, is, likewise completely out of control. We would love to control our injuries and our illnesses and so on. We can't. We can't control our feelings, the process. There's contact, there's feeling. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Poof. seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, thinking, poof. And likewise with the perceptions, and now this forming process. And this whole, as I said, this miasma of flow now is precisely what is known as being experienced, but what happens is that flow of experiencing is constantly gripping onto itself. So in an instant of contact, consciousness arises with, let's say, seeing, and the next moment hearing, and then seeing again, or feeling, and so on. And the sort of the sanya sankara, the perceptual process is animated by all of this feeling. And the constructing processes, in some sense, can't bear the anicca, cannot bear the impermanence, and grip to make real. And so experience becomes existence. Flow becomes I am. And I am now this consciousness, the cognizing of experience, becomes a indisputable fact. I am. I mean, obviously I am. Come on. Look at me. Or if I look out at you, say, I am looking at you. You don't have to look at me. I'm looking at you and I know it. I exist and you exist. In fact, thank you for helping me exist. Very kind of you. I know you're not doing it on purpose, but we've got a pretty good contract going, right? You and me together. And each time what is seen, or shall I say, even before we get to what is seen, when there's contact with, if you'll allow me to use common language, me and you, because we have to use some kind of language or we'll spend all day, playing with it. So when there's contact between me and you, seeing happens and there's the feeling. So it's pleasant in my case right now. I look at the screen and all these people I really love and respect right here. It's great, And so there's contact, perception. It's these people. It is people. There are colors, there are forms. Oh my goodness, it's heads on the screen, but it's people. And there's memory, sankara. Each of you are particular people, which then brings up the mental contact with who you are. It's not just visual contact, right? So it's mental contact. There's pleasant experience, pleasant sensation born of mental contact, my image, my memory of you. And so now this system is resonating with all of that. And consciousness is arising on that and gripping at the delight, the pleasantness. I am. And it's pretty good right now. I am. Grip, grip, grip. And the constructing process of the I am that wants to feel secure, that wants to be delighted and to be happy, is so finely attuned to you, both the particular you because of these fabrications, but also the, let's call it the generic you of other people to whom I am so acutely sensitive, because the whole body-mind construct, the whole nama rupa has been formed to be sensitive, to want and to gather and to seek you, because just the way I seek meat and fruit and berries and all that to survive, that's what I've done with you. For a couple million years I've been working on it, gotten pretty good at it. Don't even have to think about it. So the aggregated process is no longer flow. It's the I am that is gripping each moment at survival, at pleasure. And so this flux becomes existence. So is this a problem? Well, here's the thing. Once you start gripping, the process of clinging, holding, grasping, feeds on itself. And what may have been in one moment delight, in the very next moment is terror, anguish. And when, let's say, this time of our talk ends and the screen goes blank, am I all alone? Am I holding, wanting, remembering, trying to recreate this joy that I feel being with you? So once you're in the game, you're in the game. You're in the whole game. It's not a bad game. It's mostly an ignorant game. That's all. We don't know we're in the game, but we are in the game. And the fact that we don't know we're in the game keeps us in the game. That's the asava of ignorance. That's the flood of ignorance. When we don't know, then the whole body mind is flooded, is intoxicated with the not knowing, and on goes the gripping of the process. And this is samsara. This is the rounds of existence. And consciousness is so key. Every one of these khandhas is key. There's only 5 of them to describe the totality of human experience. So you got to figure they're all pretty important. Consciousness has, however, this is perhaps the most sensitive place for contemplating. Let's start with that. Let's start with just thinking about it. The pivot from experience to existence, or existence to experience, from grasping and solidity to knowing flux and not grasping. And pleasant and unpleasant contacts still happen. There's just not grasping. There's just not clinging. And can we, in our reflection process, consider Vinnana, consciousness, and maybe take a look at that pivot, get as close as we can. It's so central that the Buddha taught for one who believes in the rising and vanishing of Vinnana. And I'm going to use the language of the discourses. Rebirth in the hell realms is impossible. And this person will attain to stream entry, which is the insight from which there's really no turning back into the tumult of ignorance. That's for one who believes. And that's called a faith follower, he said. For one who basically studies and reflects on the impermanence of Vinnana, the rising and vanishing of consciousness, this is called a Dhamma follower. And likewise, no more hell realms, will attain stream entry in this life, but has not yet, right? And then for one who has experienced, who has known and seen the rising and vanishing of Vinnana, this is a stream enterer. And there is no more, no more than 7 lives is the canonical way of referring to the process of the ending of this gripping of the aggregates on themselves that we call repeated existence. So there's the challenge, of delight. That's the teaching on gratification, danger, and escape. It's gratification in form, feelings, perceptions, constructions, and consciousness. And the gratification is possible because there is so much that's pleasurable. And we take delight, and then we tumble into what? The clinging comes with the delight. From the clinging comes the becoming, comes the existence, comes the self, the birth of self, I am, comes suffering. So that's with the delight, that's the gratification. And the danger is that it's impermanent and out of control, that all of these feelings and perceptions that we delight in, they're fluxing, and the body aspect of it is fluxing. That's out of our control. We all know that. We're all old enough, if you allow me, to know that. And then, of course, the phenomena, the things, I should say, or the experience of the things is not only out of our control, it's fleeting. And there's going to be not only be painful experience, there's going to be the losing of the pleasant. And so any kind of holding is going to keep you in this space of shaky, tenuous life. There's no peace. There may be, a stimulating pleasant one moment and a stimulating unpleasant the next moment, but there's no peace. There's no non-agitation. We don't even know that non-agitation is possible in such a state. We lose track of it. I can speak to that myself. Probably you can too. If you can think of, by memory, the sort of the feeling tone of your life right before a retreat and right at the end of a meditation retreat, and compare that difference of smoothness, the quality of happiness that comes when the mind is smooth and stable and fluid, and love is naturally flowing, and a quality of just receiving the world and the world moving through you and you moving through the world is happening, then, and compare that to the grippy, agitated quality that we take as normal. We have that A-B experience. That's why meditation retreats can be so valuable. Not that it's the only place it happens, but it's, with our lives being as insane as they are, because we're part of an insane culture, and we come from insane families, and we have an insane body. So you put all this stuff together, and we need special experiences to touch what's not insane. We take the insane as normal, and we say, this is pretty good. Why would I want to not delight in this stuff? Because delight has become the refuge. That's the only place that we don't feel the insanity for a moment. And the only reason we don't feel the insanity is because we're obsessed in that moment with a pleasurable sensation. We say, oh, this is groovy. I can live with this. And that's the best it gets. Do you see what I mean? The Buddha is pointing to something with this teaching on the aggregates, that the best it gets is a heck of a lot better. That's the cessation. That's the third noble truth. Teachings on the khandhas is the teachings on suffering and the end of suffering. That's why it was so central. And the reason it's not taught is because you really need to do some learning and reflecting more deeply to get it. But you can get it, and it can influence you, can become a practice for you, a reference point. And it's just fine to be a faith follower or sort of a study Dhamma type follower. It's totally fine. It's not only fine, it's great. It's really useful. But ultimately, we're talking about experience of the rising and the vanishing of Vinnana. That's how central this teaching is. So with that background, I'd like to invite us into a guided silent practice. And so once again, if you would begin by having the body be conducive to wise attention, yonaso manasikara. And energetically, it can be helpful if you're sitting straight, upright. If you care to close your, establish simplicity, since the channel of vision is so compelling and complex, and bringing the attention to the form of the body. And you might notice the form of just the head, and is it balanced left and right, forward and back? So that it sits squarely on the neck. The neck is relaxed, supports the head easily, and merges down into the shoulders, and the arms and the hands are just relaxed and still. The natural alertness of awareness comes down through the head and the neck and down through the torso. So the upright spine and the skeletal structure supports the body, all the ribs. All the organs are sitting nested inside the torso, just letting that be relaxed. But the body is held up, sustained, it's supported. And the hips are sitting on the chair, the cushion. Part of the skeletal structure that holds up the body, connected to all the muscles and tendons. And the sitting is rooted and grounded. And the legs that support the body when you're standing likewise provide stability now as the legs come out from the hips and bend at the knees, down to the feet. And however the feet are placed, it completes this picture of the sitting form. And mindfulness rests in the entire body. Just feeling how this awareness saturates the entire body. So this form is known in all of its hardness, earth element. The same earth element that's external as this earth element in here. Just solidity, density. And the liquids, the water. And the gases that are breathed, the gases that are in the blood, the movement. And the fire, the temperature, the caloricity, heat. Just part of the sitting form. All constantly in flux. And as you investigate this sitting form, we begin to know that, or investigate, how is this being known? Noticing the aspect of Vinnana, of consciousness. In this case, body consciousness, consciousness that arises with body. Sensitive body. The feelings that move across this landscape. Body sensations, pleasant and unpleasant and neutral. The touch of the body on the chair. Perhaps the dis-ease of something that is wrong with the body, some process that's out of alignment, and there's sensations that result. Just noticing the quality of feeling. In this case, perhaps unpleasant, perhaps pleasant, perhaps even neutral. The fluxing of the form, the fluxing of the feelings. The form, nothing more than a lump of foam. You go to investigate consciousness, knowing the form, but where are the edges? Where's anything real and solid there? See what you find. Is there anything other than a lump of foam in this form? And in the feelings that play across the form, are any of them stable? These pleasant or unpleasant feelings, even the ones that seem to come from lasting injuries or disease. Consciousness arises with feeling. Is there anything stable? Feeling like a bubble. Here and gone, here and gone. Always fading off into the past. There's only the present moment. Feeling the bubble rising, vanishing, bursting. No center, whether pleasant or unpleasant. The sound of this voice constantly fading away, constantly arising, fading away. Bubbles. And with each instant of experiencing this voice, consciousness arises with hearing. Hearing consciousness. And consciousness is rising and vanishing, dependent upon the hearing. The object, the sound, vanishes, is impermanent. How could the hearing be permanent? How could the consciousness be permanent? Here and gone. Bubble. And the forming of qualities and objects like these words being spoken, being formed. Perception naturally happening at the instant of contact. Consciousness arises. Perceiving happens. And the perceiving rising and vanishing. As if there is something there. As if there is a thing. Whether it's a human behind this voice or the language being used, or my body that is sitting, perception of body. A mirage, perception is a mirage. It appears to be there, but can you grab it? Perception rising and vanishing. Consciousness arising with each perception. Rising and vanishing. Consciousness that arises with an object that's impermanent. How could it possibly be permanent? There's this consciousness, then that consciousness with this object, or with feeling, with perception, with seeing or with hearing, with feeling the body, with noticing the mind, the movement, the activity of the mind. consciousness arising with the mind door. Thoughts touch, but they're bubbles. And all the particular qualities of a thought, all the language you use in the mind, the images, sanya, perception, and mirage, rising and vanishing. And feelings and perceptions may seem to arise and take place and unfold within the totality of my personality, of my forming processes of history. The constructing and the reconstructing in each moment. The stimulating, the calming of memories, emotions, mind states. Are any of these mind states right now permanent? The emotions, the whole psychological construct, rising and vanishing now? Can you grab it? Is there a center to it? As you peel away the layers, do you get to a core? Do you get to any heartwood? Or is it like a tree without a core, without hardwood, like a banana tree? Just layer after layer, nothing in the middle. You see for yourself. This is what consciousness knows right now. Mind door consciousness. Sankara. Formations, volitional formations, constructions, a pithless tree. Nothing in the middle. And still there's the rising and vanishing, the ceaseless flux of form and feelings and perceptions. And consciousness arising with seeing, consciousness arising with hearing, with smelling and tasting, rising and vanishing each moment with the bubbles of feeling. Consciousness arising and vanishing each moment with the feelings of the body. Body consciousness. awareness of or consciousness of the body sense, the bubbles, the sanya, the perception of body. Vinnana, consciousness rising and vanishing with thought, with emotion. With mood. And is there any substance to consciousness? Or is it, as the Buddha said, like a magic show? The rising and vanishing of a magic show. The cognizing or knowing or discriminating of the world, a magic show, rising and vanishing. And the whole of the experience of these khandha, these aggregates, rising and vanishing. Different features are prominent in different moments. The stimulation of the echo chamber of our constructions, and I am becomes existence. I am. These feelings, I am, these perceptions, they are mine. They were mine in the past, they'll be mine in the future. The gripping into existence, around the feelings and thought forms. And then, perhaps, in a moment, the body-mind relaxes out of the gripping. And there's just the rising and vanishing. And the whole, the totality of the gripping self and all of the suffering can just relax into the flow. It all moves through. Perceptions, the feelings, the construction process. Everything we call I am, holding on to itself and its experiences and tightening the knot of self can begin to relax. And its nature of foam, its nature of being a bubble, a mirage, pithless and without a core, and a magic show, just processing on. And the agitation drops away. The force of enchantment that drives the grasping looses its grip. You've seen through the magic show. All the passions that enchanted the mind relax. And with the cessation of the gripping, the cessation of the agitation, the fire goes out. The body-mind process becomes cool, transparent, and adaptable. The ending of suffering is also the ending of self-obsession and fear. It's the ending of aging and death. The ending of ignorance. The ending of greed and hatred. The ending of sorrow. A life of experiencing is possible without the grip of existing. The natural responsiveness of the body mind without the holding, the freezing, the wanting and protecting and fearing, defending, getting rid of. The function of the awakened mind. A co-participation in this lived life. The mind unbound, unbounded. The fading of the self is also the fading of isolation. Of tension and fear. The natural function of kindness and compassion doesn't need to be fabricated or made. In the absence of the gripping self. The intrinsic relatedness with all beings is just a feature of this lived life. Unobscured by agitation, by doubt, unobscured by anger or even lust. Rising and vanishing. Let's take some time to move into groups of two to explore Vinnana and the rising and vanishing of Vinnana in the moment of contact, knowing that contact itself is consists of, if you will, or comes into being with the external base, the internal base, and consciousness. So consciousness associated with seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, thinking, and watching that happen with your meditation partner, attending to the quality of sort of like this, what is this? This knowing of experience, or this cognizing, or this coming into being and the vanishing of experiencing. Okay? So we'll get back together in 15 minutes, is 20 minutes after the hour. Thank you. Practice diligently. Give yourself plenty of pause. Be curious. So I hope that Aggregates meeting Aggregates was a productive experience for you. Since this is the last in this series of talks on the conduct, I want to touch into your experience and to what you know, and now go back to some of the teachings. And maybe you can, if as I name them, you can just, maybe there's some pinging, a reminding, or of your actual experience, or perhaps an arousal of Dhamma Chanda, like a kind of a joy or enthusiasm for the teachings, because then you could investigate going forward, right? So maybe you can get a sense. Let's start with some of the heaviness, when the Buddha speaks of the burden of form, feeling, perception, instructions, consciousness. The khandhas as a burden, the holding of the process onto itself, and the kind of the heaviness. Get a sense of what he might mean by the burden of ignorance arising, and the flooding of the rising and vanishing process with the gripping becomes heavy, burdensome, and it becomes an abode. He refers to it as an abode. What is the abode? It just goes through each of the khandhas, you know. Well, we've made ourselves a home. This is it. Let's live in it. And fragile. It's fragile. There's nothing there, but we're constantly trying to hold on to make it okay. Oh, crap, I've got cancer. Or, oh, God, he doesn't love me anymore. Or, I'm out of firewood. Or, this is lousy coffee. You know, it's all fragile. It's all khandhas being fragile. Or birth of sorrow. These are all separate discourses. A discourse on each of these, I'm just giving you the key phrase because it's really the same discourse over and over, frankly. Birth of sorrow. Or root of misery. You know? It's like the root. And on the path of liberation, let's be straightforward that we're talking about freedom, right? About cessation, about awakening, about coming out of the trap. This is what is to be fully understood. What is to be fully understood? Form is to be fully understood. Feelings, perceptions, fabrications, volitional formations, consciousness to be fully understood. What is the measure of awakening? Go through each kanda. The measure of awakening. What is the obsession that arises with the alteration of these things, the alteration of form. It's one moment it's good, next moment it's something you don't think is good. Feeling, perception, it changes. Past, present, future, internal, external, without basis, and yet it's constantly changing. And so the instant that there's grasping, there's alteration in the form, there's alteration in the feeling, in the consciousness, moment by moment. And we become obsessed with how it was. Oh God, it was great back before so-and-so was the president. Or it was great when I was younger, when I was healthy. This obsession with the past and the alteration in the forms, in the perceptions, the feelings. And the constantly looking to the future. Oh, it'll be better when this happens, or I wish this could happen, or I'm going to contrive to make this happen. And what's contriving? Khandhas. What is it trying to contrive? A certain state of khandhas. What is suffering through all the contriving? Khandhas. When you're talking about the totality, it's the totality. But it's just recursive. It's self trying to make itself and to make itself okay. And the freedom, this is what's to be understood. This is the cessation of aging and death. The awakening from this cycle of misery. And, when you kind of have that framework, you have the whole of the Dhamma, which we can say rather casually, or, it's holographic. Every piece is within every piece. But this is like a particularly important and powerful chunk of the holograph. It's like the superhighway where things meet. And it's a basis for reflection. It's a basis for practice. Rupam anicam, form is impermanent. Vedanam anicam, feelings are impermanent. Sanya, Sankara, Vinnana, Anicam, consciousness impermanent. Rupa Dukam, form is unsatisfactory. Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vinnana, Dukam. And Rupam Anatam, form is not self, it's not me, it's not mine, never was mine, never will be mine. External, internal, it's not mine. Feelings, perceptions, constructions, the whole constructing process, anatam, not mine, not I, not me, not self. Consciousness, not self. These are practices, right? The mind can point, the thinking mind can point, but the meditating mind goes to experience, doesn't go to just the conceiving. It's okay to start with the conceiving, but it absolutely must take you beyond conceiving. This is why the body-mind learns to develop the sati and the samadhi, the mindfulness and the concentration that can just be with the experience and know its nature, this emptiness. And, you know, in the later Buddhist schools, Mahayana and so on, they say, you know, there's not a, you know, not a fraction of an inch of distinction between samsara and nirvana. Fine, that's right. Here you go. It's just the rising and vanishing. You know it or you don't know it, but still, here it all is. And any distinction between what seems to be an individualistic path and a path in service of all beings, those are more constructs. It's simply the movement of the body-mind to non-clinging. And in non-clinging, there is the boundless love. There is the boundless compassion. And any distinctions of a religious sort are just more fabrications, right? I hope the sense of practice is alive for you. I hope these talks and guided practices have been of benefit. And I hope that you also feel the seamlessness of the individual and the relational practices. It's all the same thing. So let's take our last time together to just open the space, see if there's any questions or whatever would be of benefit, so we can learn with and from our community.
Is awareness and knowing and consciousness and mindfulness, are they all the same thing? Or?
No.
Yeah.
So to put it to give you the most simple example, consciousness arises with each contact, so each moment of seeing. Are you mindful every moment? Right? So is there knowing you know? Is there that quality of sati sampajanya, the wholesomeness of mindfulness, the right mindfulness is really what we're talking about in the Eightfold Path. And that right mindfulness has with it, intrinsic to it, the sampajanya, the sense of purpose, of direction, and you know, from a technical sense, there's a built-in quality of that this is part of a path or a method or something like that. You don't have to be thinking all that, but that becomes part of the momentum of your practice, right? So consciousness, technically speaking, is just whenever there is, when seeing is happening, when hearing is happening, when feeling the body, tasting, smelling, or thinking is happening. Consciousness is arising. Now, it can be happening in that there's no consciousness of it, and for all intents and purposes, it's not happening, right? If a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, kind of thing. So, there may be all kinds of things that where light touches the eye and consciousness doesn't arise with seeing that object. So we would say that seeing did not happen, at least of that object, right? Or all kinds of things that can be in the auditory field that are completely and totally not noticed. And then there can be things that arise in the auditory field and they're not, I don't know that they're noticed, but they are. And the mind is touched and primed for something in the future. So there's lots of subtle layers that are always going on with Vedana Sanya, feeling and perception. Very subtle. But at the same time, the process of consciousness arising with each contact, which is said to be a very, very quick process. So you could say that that there's coming out of this total, let's say, rich field of sense contact. There's constantly a process of being drawn or selecting, not conscious selecting, but the organism is selecting that which it's going to attend to, whether for survival value, other kinds of conditioning, priming from whether it's in the immediate past or the distant past. We're inclined towards seeing and not seeing certain things, and we actually don't see and we don't hear and we don't think these things, even if there's some firing of neural networks and the mind doesn't go to catch it, So, and at the same time, all of that is just the flux of the organism. Now, when we talk about mindfulness or mindful awareness, now we're talking about at least right mindfulness, right? The mindfulness as I think you meant it. There's a knowing of the process as it's happening. Now, there's lots of definitions that we could give of sati, of mindfulness, certain qualities of mindfulness that we could talk about. But the main point in distinguishing it from consciousness is that there's shall we say, a reflexive awareness, the Homo sapiens sapiens. We know. And it may be that mindfulness has as its guiding frame some particular aspect of experience. For example, mindfulness of breathing, the foundation of the mind, of attention in the moment, is guiding towards the breath rising and falling. So you can say there's mindfulness of breathing. And but meanwhile, consciousness has all kinds of other seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, thinking stuff going on. So you see what I'm saying in terms of distinguishing the two? Yeah. And then the question that is probably a bit much to go into right now of the relationship of how the language of awareness and mindfulness and so on is used. That's a different conversation, but the distinguishing of consciousness is really our work here.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The felt experience of not appropriately, not going towards anything, just really, really, really feels like to put that the burden.
Mm. Yeah, it makes me very happy to hear you say that, Gilia. I mean, you in particular, right? You and Roberto in particular, right? I mean, there's no greater blessing in facing aging, illness, and death than the teachings that free you from aging, illness, and death.
Right.
Thank you for that laugh, Roberto.
It's also inspires. If there is another breath, it's possible to go deeper. You know, so it's irresistible.
Yeah. And at bottom, each breath for all of us is that tenuous, and we just don't know it. That's what I discovered in my own experience of acute renal failure. That's where the mind went. It was magical. It was not suffering. There was no suffering.
I don't know your experience, but I can resonate, with watching the show go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Otherwise, there wouldn't be any remembering.
Right. That's the connection. This gets back to what you were asking about, Jane. That's the connection between sati as the way we construe mindfulness or awareness, and sati and its etymological roots in remembering. Because if there's no awareness in that moment, how's there going to be any remembering? Right? So you go down to that level of experience of life and death, of rising and vanishing, and there's no conceiving, at least my experience, there's no conceiving possible. I had no mind space at all for conception to form. And yet there was awareness. It was stunning and very relevant to this investigation of the conduct, right? Because the process of contact still happening, feeling, perception, constructing processes, and consciousness is still rising and vanishing. But the awareness was there, and there was no conceptual mind to cling, and there was this non-clinging to the totality. And it was, those kinds of experiences, whether in meditation or in a hospital bed or wherever you happen to experience them, reveal to each of us our own capacity for non-clinging. That the way we live is small, constricted. It's as the Buddha was saying, an abode. We fenced ourselves in to this abode. There's a beautiful phrase that comes out of the Zen tradition, horizonless quality, not just of awareness, but the horizonless heart, horizonless love, horizonless compassion. The fenced in abode is, the Buddha said, the roof ridge, the roof pole has been destroyed, shattered, no more building.
Mhm. Yeah. The
So
disembodied element, the paradox of being, having the sense doors with which to be aware, mindful, remembering, but simultaneously, really, there is a disembodied experience. Not because the body is it's being in and out. It's not constrained. I mean, there's no room for it either.
and I would just, in closing, say the body mind. There's no constraint of the mind either. There's no conceptual constraint. There's no emotional constraint. There's no mood constraint. There's no memory. There's no constraint of story. We're free from the totality of the story of the self. So, in closing, first let me thank you for listening, because it's your listening that also evokes my speaking and my reflection, and I feel I value this opportunity to touch what we've touched together, and especially while we're right here at this place, poised to know the nature of suffering and freedom. Let's remember that as we suffer in our closure and our partiality and the brokenness of the particulars of the self, so do all of us, all these beings, all this hurt and pain in our brethren, our brothers and our sisters all over the world, suffering right along with us when the mind grips and holds and fears, protects, and out of protection comes all of this ugliness of action. There's pain behind that. To let our hearts remember that and resonate with the pain of hatred, the pain of greed, the pain of power, the pain of wealth, and the pain of poverty, the pain of illness, the pain of health, where we grip, the pain of delight, the pain of isolation, the pain of fear runs through this world. And that our practice together is to see this in ourselves and in others, to receive it, let it in, be moved in compassion, and to let this wisdom, which unleashes the natural qualities of love, to let that dissolve the gripping. Seeing through, and the mind becomes free. May all beings experience release. Without exception, all beings, seen and unseen, the born and the yet to be born. May all beings, far and near, of every type of consciousness, be free from suffering. May there be peace. May there be peace. May there be peace.